But re-exams are extremely, extremely important. And this is one thing I wanted to talk to you guys about this morning because let's say you did nothing else. You didn't do any type of marketing or outreach or lunch and learns, anything like that, even asking for referrals. If you did nothing else but improved your procedures with regard to re-exams, your practice would grow and the retention would grow. And remember, we talked about that LTV, which is the lifetime value of a patient. If you don't remember, LTV was you take your total collections on a monthly basis. So let's just say it's $30,000, for example, or $50,000. Let's go with $50,000 because it's easy. And if you have 25 new patients a month and your collections are $50,000, your LTV would be $2,000. You just divide the two numbers. 25 into 50,000 would be 2,000. So and if you're up at $2,000, that's a really good LTV. But to increase your LTV, that's the amount that people are generally spending over the lifetime that they're going to be in your office. So it's a relative number. But if you did that on a regular basis and averaged it out every month, ideally you want to see that go up over time. If it's down below $1,000, remember, that's the sign of not a good retention practice. So if your LTV is very low, your retention's terrible. So this is a good reason to start putting re-exam procedures in your office. So what I want to start this morning is let's talk about statistics. And this is one thing we weren't great at it, but we were really good at it. So let me just kind of explain this. And the fact that I had one staff member who took charge of everything when it came to the uh, non-front desk type of administration. So she was really good at following up with the leads, like any type of online marketing leads, leads that came from dinners, leads that came from any screenings we did. She took that under control. And she was really good at following up with all of the new patients and we used to have this training all the time, a year in the life of a patient. So she actually created a spreadsheet. Now she did it on paper, but you can create a spreadsheet, whether it's on paper or let's say it's a Google sheet, a Google Doc. So what you can do is you start on a monthly basis, start tracking every single new patient that comes into your office. So every single day one. So obviously, and she took it further, she was monitoring every single lead that came in, no matter where they came from, and she had stats on where they would come from. And then when they got to day one, she would have this chart and she would bring it to every single staff meeting. So she knew the status of every single day one at any time. And she kept up with this on a daily basis. She would fill it up. So what was really kind of cool, and here's a good stat to do. So obviously figure out that LTV, figure out where you're at, and have a starting point. But if you start putting these things into play, this will pay off big time for you. So you start keeping track of every day one on the spreadsheet and then move those names to day two when they come to day two, move them to day three when they come to day three, doctor's report, however you do it. Some of you are doing day one, day twos and sign them on. Some of you are doing day one, day two, day threes, whatever the process is for you, right, that works the best. And obviously I would say, you know, and I've seen this happen hundreds and hundreds of times when somebody does a day one, day two, day three, and gets really good at sharing a live doctor's report with people with emotion and passion, your practice explodes. I mean, that's been shown. That is a truth that happens. So however you have modified it for yourself, that's got to be your call. But follow through with those stats. So ideally, and what I'm getting at here is that let's say in June, if you had 25 day ones, then in July, assuming that your first re-exam is 1 month later, so ideally the first re-examination should be 30 days and I would always say 4 weeks. We always went 28 days, so 4 weeks, because that would be 12 adjustments at 3 times a week. So 4 weeks would be their first re-exam. So on the 12th visit, or 28 days, whichever came first. So if they miss an appointment, it might happen at 10 visits or 9 visits or whatever, but it would never go more than a month. So have that scheduled in. And what Diana would do is she would monitor all of the day ones from June. That means in July, if there were 25 day ones in June, there should be 25 first re-exams. And if there weren't, then that's a problem. because that means those day ones, either they didn't get to day two, they didn't sign on, they didn't make it to their first re-exam. But following through with that spreadsheet, then you start to see patterns in where people are dropping off. So here's a thing to think about. And if you start following these stats, this is very valuable because it will show you where the weaknesses are in your systems in your office. So if you have 25 day ones in June, and let's say you're only getting 12 re-examinations in July, so that means only half of those day ones made it to day two, signed on, stayed under care, and actually made it to the end of their first month to their first re-exam. So, that obviously there's some work there. If you're only getting 12 re-examinations, first re-examinations in July versus 25 new patients, that there's a problem. So then we can kind of dissect, where is the roadblock? Where are people dropping off? And here's one thing that I've talked to many of you about this before, is that if your procedures are pretty good, and this is what happens too in an office that doesn't do live doctor's reports, you're doing one-on-ones. And a lot of people say, oh, I do one-on-ones and I'm having great success with one-on-ones, and people sign on. Well, maybe they don't bring their spouse, but we still get good sign-ons. But the retention's terrible. Okay. So, you're getting 60, 70, 80 new patients a month, and, you're seeing 300, 350 patients a week. So clearly there's not a lot of commitment there. So there's a drop off somewhere. So this is what happens in the fact that what we can do, and here's a really simple way to try to help people to understand, it's almost a recommitment date. And so I would say that you can, on, let's say it's day 5 or day 6. So if they've signed on day 2 or day 3, follow the drop off. Where are patients, where's the graph starting to drop off? And it might be day 4, it might be day 5. Have it just a simple consultation with them. Set it up, make it a consistent thing where on day 4 or day 5, you actually set up a consultation with them where you take them into the room, and it can be done primarily by the CA when it's trained on, well, is that all you do is you have their x-rays up on the screen, and simply you go in and say, hey, John, I just wanted to go over the things that we started with in the beginning. Do you remember why I was so concerned about what I saw on these x-rays? And the only reason you're doing this is to remind them in their mind, make it fresh in their mind, the seriousness of their problem. Because maybe by day 4, day 5, they're starting to feel better, right? Maybe the initial pain they came in with is starting to go away. So they forgot about how bad their curve is. They forgot about their pelvic unleveling or scoliosis or the osteophytes on L3, L4, whatever. So all you're doing is you're reminding them about the seriousness of what you found in those x-rays. It might be a lack of cervical curve. It might be the scoliosis, whatever that case is. And that's the question you ask, is that, do you remember why I was so concerned with what I saw in these x-rays? And then you be quiet and wait for the answer. Maybe you have to guide them into that answer. What's that doing to your nervous system? Not only is it affecting nerves that are going to the pain, but it's also, here's my big concern, is that it's also affecting nerves that are going to your bladder, that are going to your colon, that are going to your digestive organs, that are going to your lungs, that are going to your heart. And that's a problem, because let's say, John, if you stopped care prematurely, is this problem going to get better or worse? And then you be quiet. So it's a few very directed questions which are going to stimulate a very obvious answer. Anybody in their right mind knows if you come in with concern, it's going to get worse if they quit. Exactly. It's going to get worse. So that's why I can't encourage you enough to make sure you keep up with this program. We're going to, and I always give them a goal. Your first re-examination is in 3 weeks. So in those 3 weeks, do you think you can commit to making sure you're here 3 times a week? You can commit to doing your home care on a daily basis? Yes. So you're just getting a recommitment from them. It's just a reminder. So that's a nice thing to implement in if you're finding those stats are showing drop off. Okay. It's a simple thing, very simple thing. So this is where these stats can be so valuable for you. Okay. So that was the first thing I wanted to get to. Any questions? Any comments on that? Is anybody doing that? Wilson, you're
I'll
saying
say
yes?
um I'll say I went over to Elevate yesterday and shadowed Devin, and man, does he ever speak with concern about the nervous system, right? And um, on day one, day two, and every visit as well too, right? It's all linking back to the nervous system, and concern is very high and very confident and certain as well too. So yeah, and as a result, it makes a huge difference in people's long-term commitment. I could see it right there.
I remember back when we first started learning scripting, this is back in the day, this is probably what, going back 25 years ago. The day two was the initial report of findings before we bridged the day. We called it the bridge day. Day one, day two, day three, day two was the bridge day. And it was all about creating concern. It was all about, I've looked at your x-rays. I am concerned. You do have subluxation. It's worse than what we both thought, right? So immediately the patient's like, whoa, what do you mean? Not only is it affecting nerves that are causing your pain, but my concern, it's affecting nerves that are causing these organs to be affected as well. And if this gets worse, what happens to those organs? They start to break down, and ultimately you start to gain bad health, right? Or getting closer to life or death. Are you getting closer to vitality or closer to a life of doom and gloom? And ultimately the patient knows the answer to that. So that was a huge, huge day as far as getting the patient to commit to their conversion. So bringing concern to that is so vital. And if you take that concern that you use on day two and bring it to that consultation day or to your first re-exam, ultimately you're reminding the person how important it is to engage in their chiropractic care and retain their chiropractic schedule. Okay. Very important. And here's the thing, guys, and some of you, and I've had many comments over the years, and that fact is, there were people that used to use the term scare tactics, and that all goes back to your commitment on how severe in your mind is a subluxation. And in my mind, it's the absolute worst thing that could potentially happen. I mean, if you have subluxations in your spine, not only is your spine degenerating from an osseous standpoint, not only is it affecting you on a musculoskeletal level, your ranges of motion are decreased, your mobility is decreased, but neurologically, it affects your growth and development, and emotionally and mentally, it affects your growth and development and longevity. So it's the worst thing. It is absolutely the worst thing. It is the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the onset of disease, when your body is at a lack of homeostasis. So I am totally committed to the fact that people need to understand that this is a severe, severe condition. And I don't want anybody to not get that or have to live with that condition. So that's, again, mindset stuff. So we get them to that first re-examination, okay, on the 12th visit or the 28th day, if you will. And one thing, and again, this was very valuable too, in the fact that our staff member, Diana, so she was really adept at keeping track of where people were in their schedule. So she would bring that to every huddle as well. Not only did it come to every staff meeting, every huddle. So she would be aware to say, okay, well, Stephen's at his 10th visit, which means his re-exam is in at the end of the week. Like here it is Monday. He's coming in Thursday for his 12th visit. He's in Wednesday, Thursday. So we would pre-frame for all those people that are having re-examinations this week when they're in for the 10th visit. Hey, just great news. Your first re-examination is coming up later this week. Make sure you're here on time. You're going to be here an extra 15 minutes. You don't want to be doing any wobbling or any tractioning before your re-exam because we did the thermal scan and that would alter the results. So that was one of our objective measures that we used in our re-exam from our initial visit that we compared. So being aware of people are where they are in their care is again very important. So having that team member that's keeping track of that is so valuable for you. Like it'll seriously, it'll make you money by keeping those stats and keeping track of those people. Okay. They don't fall by the wayside. Because how often here's the thing, and it happened. Listen, it happened in our office too. You know, something would come up in a huddle or at a shift one day, and you go, "Hey, what happened to Wilson? Gosh, I haven't seen him in a while. When was the last time he was in? Oh, it was 3 weeks ago." And he came in and he missed his appointment at the end of that week. And oh yeah, I think I followed up and left a voicemail, but they just fall through the buckets, right? And we forget if we don't have the systems in place or somebody really keeping track and engaging that person, they just fall through the wayside. And we have all kinds of holes in our bucket. So if you don't have the team member that's doing that, you need to get one, or you need to train one to do that. Okay, Tony, that's absolutely vital. I mean, that's all stuff that Tony and I talk about all the time. So that's really, really vital. Okay, so we get to first re-exam. And so we're prepared. We know who's coming in. So in the huddle, we know exactly who's coming in for special visits that day. So day ones, day twos, re-examinations, who's coming to doctor's report that night, whatever that is. So we go through the re-exams. And one thing that I did always talk about with the staff, we got in bad habits, right? Because we used to do the nerve scan. It was the Insight. And we just used the thermal scans because we tried to expedite the time, because using the thermal and the EMG and the heart rate variability and all that stuff took way too much time. So we just did the thermal scans. We thought that was the most valuable. And so they got in the habit of calling them scans. So, oh, you're in for a scan on Thursday. And finally, I nipped that one in the bud, because scan sounds so much like scam. And people say, I'm coming in for a scam. So we wanted to add value to the reexamination. So so then we started calling it the comprehensive reexamination. And so patients started calling, oh, comprehensive reexamination, what happens there? So it immediately, the term of that just added value. So they would come in for their comprehensive reexamination. So it was a 5-part thing. Patient would know it's happening. So there was no, if at any time somebody came in and said, oh, I'm having a re-exam today. Oh, I didn't know that was happening. Then it'd be like we dropped the ball somewhere. Okay. So we often talked about that. So we wanted to make sure every single person knew that they were coming in and it was going to take longer and what was entailed. So the first thing they would do is they would fill out a questionnaire. And we just had the questionnaire on a piece of paper. And I can share it. In fact, the questionnaire is in our client portal if you guys want to take the questionnaire and edit it. But it was a quality control questionnaire, but it asked intentional questions. Do you remember what was wrong on your initial set of x-rays? So it's, again, pre-framing this because I'm going to ask them in the room anyway. Do you have any financial concerns? Do you plan on following through with your care, your care plan? Are you doing your home care? Have your children been checked? Like it's all these intentional questions that we had. So if you don't have something like that, I would encourage you to do that, because again, you're just re-engaging the patient in their process. So they would fill out their questionnaire. Staff would bring them in the room, and we had team do most of the re-exam. So they would bring them in the room. Team would do the thermal scan. They would go over the questionnaire with that person and ask if there was anything blank. They'd probably make sure, fill all these things in. And then they would ask, hey, listen, through your first month here in the office, or your first few weeks here in the office, who have you been thinking about that really needs to be here? And that was kind of the way we phrased the question. Who have you been thinking about that really needs to be here? It's not like, who do you know that should come in? It was more of just a reminder to them, because ultimately always somebody would come after doctor's report or come through the first few weeks of their care and say, oh yeah, I know my friend John is having such a hard time at work, and man, does he ever need to be here? So we would intentionally ask them, and they would start the conversation with, okay, how can we get John in here? What do you want us to do? Do you want us to call him? And then we would follow up. So they would go through the questionnaire, highlight anything that I needed to address. Okay. And then leave that questionnaire on a clipboard outside the room so I could look at it before I went in the room. So it was kind of a pre-frame to allow for intentional conversation. She would do the thermal scan, and I say thermal scan, but it can be anything that you're using as an objective measurement from your initial exam. So something that you showed the patient that you measured, whether it's a nerve scan, whether it might just be the x-ray, it might be a posture check, bilateral scales, whatever that is, as long as it's something you can compare and show the patient that comparison. Because remember, you're using tools to take the mindset of pain away from the patient and put it on objective measurement. Because when we make adjustments, we're making objective changes to the structure to allow for better function. So we want to make sure the patient, understands that, and there's every congruency to show that. Okay, so if you're doing any tests on the initial exam that you're not following through with, they're useless tests, really. Like if it's orthopedic tests or any, ranges of motion, if you don't follow through with them and check them, why would you do that? Like there's no point in doing that. Okay. So so that would be the second part, is that she would do the thermal scan. I would come in, I'd address anything that was of concern before anything else on that questionnaire. So if it's a financial concern, whatever, we do that before the adjustment. Get that out of the way. I'd make the adjustment, and then we always had the x-rays up on the screen. And so then I would just basically, as soon as they got up from the adjustment, initially my conversation would go right to those x-rays. Do you remember seeing these x-rays 4 weeks ago? So Tony, do you remember seeing these x-rays 4 weeks ago? Tony would say, yeah. Do you remember why I was so concerned with what I saw on this? And typically we'd show the lateral cervical x-ray. That was the one we focused on the most. Yeah, lack of my curve, right? Do you remember what it's supposed to be? Yeah, it's supposed to be 43 degrees. Okay, right. So we follow through that. So you're only at 16 degrees. So if you quit care now, this was always the next question. If you quit care now, is this going to get better on its own, stay the same, or eventually get worse? And I'd shut up. And they'd say, well, yeah, get worse. Exactly. So remember, you're still on 3 times a week. You still should be doing your home care. We're going to do another re-examination in another 4 weeks. And hopefully at that point, we'll be able to drop you down to 2 times a week and then do your re-x-ray to see how things are changing. That was just all part of the process. So whatever plan of management you have for that person, that's when to bring that up. But it's always those questions on the x-rays, reminding them about their initial x-rays, or if you don't use x-rays, their objective measurement. If it's a nerve scan, if it's range of motion, posture pictures, whatever, it's always relating back to changing that structure or function. Okay. So this is our re-examination procedure. So it goes through the 5 things, right? It talks about the huddle, and then it talks about the day of the re-exam and how the staff should receive the re-exam. And so the first thing is obviously the questionnaire and different questions to ask on the questionnaire. The questionnaire is also on our client portal. The outcome measure that you're using, thermography, EMG, whatever that is, ranges of motion palpation, the adjustment, the x-rays, and certain questions you should ask during the x-ray assessment and x-ray interaction. And then the big thing here, and this is your opportunity to really engage with the patient as far as their level of care. So asking closing questions where it's, hey, Mary, I noticed that you haven't had your children checked. We were very adamant at the beginning about getting children checked. And if they hadn't been in by first re-exam, clearly there's a disconnect. Like either she doesn't believe me, or she doesn't care about her children, or they just haven't had time, whatever that is, or haven't made it a priority. And I never like to say they didn't have time. Everybody has time. We all have 24 hours in a day. They just didn't make it a priority. So I would call people on that. And so my big thing was, if Mary in the office had a reverse curve in her neck, or if she had a scoliosis, or if she had pelvic unleveling, or if she had arthritic changes in her spine, I would always ask and say, listen, these problems, subluxation patterns, degeneration, arthritis, scoliosis, these are all genetic type of problems. Wouldn't it be a good idea to get your kids checked now before they suffer with the same problems that you have? That was a fantastic question. And ultimately, that was like a kind of shot between the eyes, like, holy smokes, I've been neglectful at not getting my kids in. And that was a real good question to ask to help them to say, okay, yeah, all right. So, and we I always had a staff member in the room too. So I would say, Diana, can you please, when you take Mary up to the front, make sure that you schedule some time. And my thing was, I would always, if you need to move some things around, like if you need to rearrange some patients so that she can pick a time to get her kids in, let's just do that. I would say that for everybody, just to create urgency that it was such a important thing. So Diana just knew, okay, well, Dr. Collins obviously very concerned about this. Mary, let's get your kids checked. I would then ask, different things like, have you been to any advanced talks yet? And I would always know, but, and especially if she hadn't been to our nutrition talk, hey, wouldn't it be a good idea to get, and is there somebody that you can think of that maybe needs some help with nutrition or, for instance, weight loss? That's a great time to bring them to the nutrition talk. Okay. And is there somebody at your workplace, at your church, your kids' sports teams that are having similar health concerns as you that may benefit from coming here? So again, it was a good time to stimulate her mind to think, okay, yeah, this is a good time for me to refer somebody. We always had flyers or we had gift cards in the room, like gift certificates in the room for a reduced cost initial examination that she could pass out to her friends. And here's another one too. Let's say you get somebody at a re-exam who might not be progressing in a happy way. Maybe they're as bad as they were when they came in. Maybe they're a little worse. Maybe they're thinking this is not working for me. This is a good time to start analyzing with them. And we always knew in huddle, and so I'd be prepared for this. Have they missed appointments? Have they been truly engaged in their care? And if they have been truly engaged and they're doing their home care and they're there when they're supposed to be, and they're still, maybe their objective findings have gotten worse, or symptomatically they're feeling worse, that would be a great opportunity for me to say, you know what, I think maybe we underestimated the amount of care that you need. Perhaps for the next 2 weeks, you need to be here 5 days a week or daily. Perhaps we need to add in some whatever decompression services. We didn't have a decompression table, but we had an inversion table in our office, which we would use for that type of purpose. So maybe we have to add that in. Maybe we have to add massage therapy. Maybe we have to add some, modality or whatever, some of you use SoftWave or whatever the case is. So you have an extra care plan that you can stack on top. And it would be a great way to stack some of the services so that Mary feels like she's being looked after and getting her results because she's not getting them with what she's doing. So you're paying attention to her, and it's a win-win. She ends up coming in more often or getting involved in another care plan or using another service in your office. So never be afraid to do that. Okay. So, and then the last thing is I would always end with, I was always a very kind of a touchy, huggy type of person. So I'd always give them a hug, no matter who it was, no matter how they smelled, no matter how sweaty they were, whatever the case. I would always give them a hug, and I would always tell them, just share some love and basically say, you know what, I really appreciate the fact that you're putting your trust and confidence in us. You're a really important person in my practice. I wish I had a lot more people like you. I appreciate the fact that you understand why you're here. So I reinforce that. I purposely would say that. I appreciate that you understand why you're here, to get your subluxations corrected, to bring the best vitality you can to your life. And I wish I had more patients like yourself. And I'll continue to do everything that I can possibly do to keep you incredibly healthy for the rest of your life. So intentionally for the rest of your life, you're planting that seed, rest of your life. So that was kind of the way I did that re-exam. And ultimately I would be in the room for them for, with them for no more than maybe 3 or 4 minutes. Providing it didn't have any specific questions. But so we booked re-exams in the middle of a shift, during adjusting times, and it wouldn't take long to get in and out of the room. But that was with the staff helping. Awesome.
I say we've definitely recently had a couple challenges with retention in terms of just like people wanting to stop care and stuff like that, like partway through. So
Yep.
I'm working on improving the systems as well too.
And that's,
tabletop.
I mean, and listen, we all have that for sure. But if it's becoming more common, all it is a loss of value. That's all it is. So if it gets to that point where they have made the decision that, oh, I have to stop care because of whatever, money or time or whatever the case is, they've lost the perspective and they don't value it as much. Um, and that's a sign to us that if we wait till it gets to that point, it's too late. Like if we try to save a person when they're saying that, it's too late. That's why putting these things in place. And I can't tell you enough. So having somebody to monitor your stats and just do that spreadsheet with the day ones, the day twos, the day threes, the re-exams, and follow through and do it on a month-to-month basis. So you have a different sheet for every month and following through with those people. So you constantly are aware of where everybody is in their care plan and where they're dropping off. That is so huge because you can address it before it becomes a problem.